This is the Marketing Agency Power Hour, and I'm your host, Cal Wilder. Each week, we'll power through discussions on business challenges, success stories, and game-changing strategies. This show is sponsored by SmartBooks, provider of bookkeeping and accounting for marketing agencies. Let's get started. So I'm super excited to be speaking to today's guest. He's a business founder, he's a marketing growth expert, he's a speaker, an author, and a strategic leader. He's a communications professional with expertise in the life science and healthcare industries. He's a published author with 2 books, Persuading Scientists and Catalytic Experiences. And as this episode is published, you may see his 3rd book on the market, Not Buying It, The Art of Selling to Doctors, Scientists, and Other Professional Skeptics. He's also an insightful TEDx speaker, and I encourage all listeners to check out his TED Talk. He's the founder and CEO of the Linus Group. Hamid Ghanadan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Cal.
Thrilled to be speaking with you.
Hello from Boulder, Colorado.
And if you're watching this on video, there's a beautiful view out his back window there. But let me ask you the first big question I ask all my guests. What is the single most powerful strategy for success in your firm these days?
Well, I've been in business for 30 years, and I think the number one thing that has really made Linus stand apart is we always try to find a third way. We've always looked for the sort of the counter movement, or finding the third side of the truth, as we say. That's one of our core values. Is there's always my side of the story and your side of the story, and then there's a third kind of thing that we can build together. And so what's really driven a lot of success for Linus is, instead of looking at it from sort of our clients' perspective and their products and offerings and looking outwards, we actually look at it from their clients or customers' perspective, and then we look inward. So we've amassed expertise in the psychology of the technical buyer, and we bring that in with tremendous empathy and humility into all the work that we do. That's sort of philosophically what's really driven a lot of success at Linus.
And so we'll get into your history, but you in the audience will see that you're kind of uniquely positioned to do that. But I'm curious, what it was. How did you get the rest of the firm developed into that mindset with that skill and ability to look at it that way?
Yeah. So interestingly, I actually started the firm with that idea, or with that inspiration in mind. I was actually a chemist. I was working in the biochemistry department of a university doing research. And I noticed that facts weren't the only things at play when scientists debated topics. And so I asked myself that question: is what there's got to be other things that influence this dynamic here in the sciences. And that led me to develop marketing and develop the firm. And so through the years, I've actually hired people who have the same kind of mentality of really being obsessed with the idea of how the human brain works, and what are the triggers and how you might influence them. So the firm is really uniquely kind of, a combination of people who all care about that. That's sort of our singular focus here at Linus.
So how many of your folks have kind of a science background?
3 or 4 of us have a true science background. Many of us, so we're very multidisciplinary at Linus. I would say that the other aspect of what we look for, which there's a cross section for, is storytelling. So journalists, filmmakers, storytellers. Those are all people who we've hired as well. And the nexus between those two things is that the story is actually the technology that is the most ancient technology that the human brain has adapted to with in driving behavior or changing action. And so, there are storytelling formats and techniques that you can use to get people to either abandon a particular belief or to be inspired enough to move toward a new belief or new actions. And so we use a lot of that. So the team is really multidisciplinary around science and storytelling, or scientific storytelling. So that, and we also do a tremendous amount of market research. and insights work. And so that's again where those two, areas of expertise really come into play, where we're looking for what are the triggers, what are the sort of the human emotions, what are the triggers that allow us to create an opening in the minds of a customer so that we can deliver the right value proposition and we can get the right action as a result.
Right. Because in your TED talk, you were talking about, what it means for a scientist to be successful. And you gave some examples, Linus Pauling or Thomas Edison. And I think you said it was needed a combination of not only kind of logical acceptance of their work product, but also, the audience needs to emotionally accept and embrace their results, and they can help accomplish that through storytelling, like you're talking about now.
That's exactly it. I think, the a big myth that we have, it's not even a myth because it's the truth, is that science, they deal with facts and data as their currency, and they communicate based on facts and data as their currency. But that's not enough in order to drive someone's decision. And that's what I found in my work. And the team here, that's what we practice here, is this idea that there's more to the story than just the data, the facts and the figures. Look, if information was enough to get people to behave in the intended way, then as a society, as a species, we would be behaving very differently today because we have more information and more facts and more figures, and more knowledge than ever before. And yet we're still acting very much on a much broader, much more beautiful spectrum actually of humanity. And so that's no difference in if you're trying to sell to a scientist, if you're trying to sell to a doctor or hospital, or even how doctors and patients, communicate in that technical setting, or how a patient makes the decision, about their health or their prognosis or their treatment and so on. So all of that really opens the door to that beautiful sort of complex spectrum, and it gives us a lot more than just sort of factual information, which doesn't really drive people's behavior.
And in the realm of science, you somehow have to combine the logic with the emotion. Whereas if I'm selling jewelry or maybe even cars or something, it's much more emotional decision without a whole lot of logical component to it.
Absolutely. I think, I don't think scientists sort of get swept away to buying a new instrument. They, it is a very intended, and very methodical and thought out way of doing things, but emotion is still very much at play there. And so a lot of mistakes that I see, is that companies who actually believe that emotions at play, then they go sort of uber emotional, in their communication. They get sort of really sort of soft and aspirational, uh, and they almost do it at the detriment of facts and figures. So how do you communicate something factual, technical, or scientific or medical, but do it with emotional punch? That's the sort of the trick of how you can actually deliver a story in a way that lands and then and then drives somebody to actually take that action. So that's that delicate balance that we've come to really sort of master in the last 30 years.
Could you highlight an example of that, whether it's work that you and your firm have done or somebody else has done successfully or, in your opinion, very well?
Sure. So here's an example. We were working with a large medical devices company, a name you would have known, and the division that we were working with didn't actually sell products that go inside of patients. That's what a lot of medical devices are. This division actually sold things that went into the hospital, so hospital equipment and so on. And we were asked to investigate why a particular ventilator wasn't really delivering the results for this company that they were expecting, because this ventilator had a really unique feature to it. So heaven forbid anybody listening or yourself have ever been on a ventilator. It's a really agitating experience, because a ventilator is basically just the step motor that aspirates and dispenses air at regular intervals. And the human body, because of metabolism and because of biology, doesn't breathe in completely, rhythmic fashion. Even if you're asleep or unconscious, your body may crave 11 breaths 1 minute and 18 breaths the next, and then 15 breaths the minute after that. And so imagine I do this exercise, I do this thought exercise. Imagine being, if you've ever scuba dived, imagine being underwater, but not really the oxygen not being available when you want to take that deep inhale. Or when you're ready to exhale, it's not really ready there. So that the regulator that's in your mouth is deciding when you take a breath in or out. It's incredibly agitating. And so our client actually had a technology that eliminated that allowed, there was a sensor that sensed when the human wanted a breath and triggered the thing, but nobody cared. Like, why? I don't understand why. This is what they were saying to us. Like, we have this lockout feature. We're not really getting as much of a traction in the market. And so we went and did market research on this, and we talked to a lot of the people in the ICU. And what we learned was that they actually, so first of all, it's the patient that's in pain, right? It's not the respiratory technician, the nurse, or the
And the patient's basically unconscious, right? So they're not even communicating.
a lot of times they're unconscious, or a lot of times they're actually really agitated. Like we saw videos of them just getting almost violent, ripping the tubes out of their mouths and just like not wanting to. And then we saw like you just flip the switch and they just go to sleep. It's amazing how the difference. But what we learned in doing our investigation is that the normal sort of practice is if a patient's uncomfortable, you sedate them. And sedating them is actually sort of backwards to what they need to do. Because if a patient's on a ventilator, you got to get them off that ventilator kind of quickly, because the body atrophies and it can't breathe on its own. And so we found some papers that talked about how oversedation was actually a big problem in the ICU, and and sort of patient ventilator asymmetry was one of the reasons why patients get oversedated in the ICU.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said almost unconscious. Like they're not actually speaking, and unless they happen to be conscious enough to try to tear the thing out or whatever and get agitated, they don't really cause a problem. They're kind of quiet and not causing much of a problem, even though they might be in pain.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, they may be unconscious. They may be unconscious due to trauma, but the sedatives that are delivered are actually, masking the problem. And so we realized. So this is where the emotionality comes in that you asked me about. Instead of going out and saying we have a ventilator that removes asymmetry between the ventilator and the patient, we basically said 42% of ICU patients will be oversedated. Make sure your patient's not one of them. That is an emotionally charged statement for anybody who reads it who's in the ICU, because they know that oversedation is a problem. So factual data delivered with emotional punch makes everything else, land differently. So that's what I mean by like that. You asked for an example of how you actually deliver a fact or a figure, but do it with heightened emotion. That's how you do it.
And when we were speaking earlier, you mentioned your firm was structured more as a traditional agency up until several years ago, and then you made a transition to more of your approach now around research and messaging and whatnot, right? So what prompted that transition, and how did that go?
Well, I'll preface by saying change is really hard, and it was a process of a lot of humility and a lot of honesty with myself. I'd built Linus as an agency, and we were chasing growth sometimes for its own sake. And so as a result, we had a wide portfolio of services, some of which we were really good at, some of which we weren't, some of which we were being undercut for, and some of which was profitable and some of which wasn't. And so I didn't really know where to go with the firm. And so we were being, we were just succumbing to a lot of competitive pressure. And I felt that we had more uniqueness than our clients were receiving, because they were masked by all the stuff that we were trying to sell them. And that's where the humility comes in. I had to look in the mirror and say, I built an agency that I don't believe is best in the world. And so then I had a lot of conversations with some of my, clients, some of whom I trusted, some of whom we had done work in the past. And I actually asked them, I said, is Linus good at anything? And what is it that we're good at? And over again, they came to us and they said, there's a lot of stuff that you do that other people do. In fact, sometimes other people do it better and other people do it cheaper. But, over and over again, they told us there's a few things that they believe that we do that nobody else does. And so imagine the idea that you've built, a multi-million-dollar business, and now you're going to lob off a whole bunch of the offerings that make up those multi-million dollars with just the blind faith that the value that you deliver is hopefully going to be worth the same amount of money. And that was really tough for me to kind of come to peace with, and then, but it was very clear that we needed to do this. And so we essentially stopped doing some of the work that we had been doing before. And that required a change in our personnel. It required a change in our value proposition. It just frankly required a massive sort of a refounding of Linus. So at this point, Linus was 20 years old or so, 25 years or so old. And so to basically let go of all that legacy and say we're no longer an agency. And so several things ended up happening as a result. Number one, our top line revenue didn't go down at all. But we had a much leaner staff, and we were able to focus on the thing that we believed we were best in the world at. So I'm extremely blessed to have had that happen. The second thing that happened was we had a much leaner team now, and we had moved everything into the cloud. And this was September of 2019. And I think everyone listening knows exactly what happened in about 5 months thereafter. So no more high rents, no more lots of payroll to be dealt with. During the pandemic, when everything is shut down, we were able to not skip a beat. We were already sort of in the cloud. All of our processes were in the cloud and nimble. And so we were able to basically just continue. And in fact, right there and then we doubled down on finding out what's happening in the market on behalf of our clients. So we ended up deploying a lot of market research just for free to be able to advise our clients and then eventually the industry as a whole. And that really cemented us as this new value proposition, as our new offerings. People sort of didn't think of us as an agency anymore because we were the ones who were the purveyors of all this insight about what was happening. And so to be able to move into delivering insights was, we leveraged that moment as a way to reposition ourselves. So it was what I just described to you was about a year-long process. I mean, I was looking at all kinds of different models, in that. And again, a lot of it was introspection. Like change starts here. Change starts inside. And there's a lot of growth that came out of that.
And I think it was, in hindsight, it was a brilliant move. And I think it probably helped a little bit with the timing of what happened over the next couple of years as well. But one thing I'll say is one of the things you said at the beginning of that story was, the question you went to ask clients, which sounded like a very difficult and humbling question to ask, which is like, are we good at anything? And if so, what it is? And I struggle with that kind of question as well, because, we do professional services in the bookkeeping, accounting, tax, CFO space. And we do periodic business reviews with clients to try to keep the relationship on target. And I try to get folks, I don't do all those myself. I try to get folks to ask a question at some point, something along the lines of, we'd love to keep working with you, enjoy working with you, but what might cause you to stop working with SmartBooks over the next 18 months? Nobody wants to ask that question because it's a tough question to ask, and you might get some negative feedback. You might get an answer that's painful to get. But if you're not humble enough to ask that question, then you don't have the information.
Yeah. I agree with you. I applaud you for that. I think that's really clear. The two things come to mind when you say that, Cal. Number one is I believe that I have to earn the right to serve my clients every single day. Like I never should take it for granted. My team should never take it for granted that we have a client, that we should re-earn that. And I learned that from a friend of mine who said, every day I show up for my job, I'm applying for my job. Like every single day I'm applying to keep my job. And that's an incredible mindset to have, to make sure that you don't take it for granted. And then the second thing is actually a little bit of a parable. You know the difference between a cow and a buffalo? And not biologically, but how they act.
Not really, no.
A herd of cows sees a storm coming, they turn around and run away. If a buffalo sees a storm coming, they walk right into it. Which species do you think lasts longer in the storm? It's the buffalo gets through it because they're walking through it. You know, they're trying to get to the other side.
Without walking with the storm, they're gonna, yeah, yes.
The cow is actually trying to run away, knowing full well that they're not going to be able to outrun the storm. And so they spend more time in the storm. And I actually take a lot of, what you just described is actually somehow this buffalo mentality of walking into the storm. Look, the bottom line is by asking that question, you're not actually like, it's not like asking that question makes them all of a sudden realize that they're not satisfied with you. The dissatisfaction is already there anyway.
They're already thinking about it. It's just a question of whether you know or not.
Yeah. And you create intimacy by asking that question because they recognize, oh, Cal actually, or his firm actually cares. And they're trying to do better and they want to do better. And the people that I ended up asking during that time were so gracious to me. I mean, I am forever grateful for them giving me the real answer, not just sort of, platitudes. They actually said, here's the stuff that you do. Here's everything that you do. Here's the stuff I don't think you should offer. Like, you actually are not good at this. This stuff, you're okay. This stuff, we can't get anywhere else. And that's what they told us over and over again. And so that was, I mean, gosh, which business owner doesn't want to have unvarnished truth that way? And I was just so lucky that my community was willing to give me that information.
So far, we've talked a lot about your approach to driving ultimately success for clients and the pivot you made with your own firm that's driven success for your firm over the last several years. But looking to the future, what are your dreams for Linus over the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Okay, so interestingly, I'm actually going through this process with my business partner right now. Is we are, it's an exciting time right now in the life sciences and healthcare. There's been a lot of change in the last 2 years. Sort of novel economic pressures, a lot of technologies that are coming online that are, have the potential to significantly change the way healthcare is delivered or science is done or both. AI is playing a huge role into this. And we're trying to figure out where we deliver value. So again, going back to the top of our conversation, we're trying to find the third way. And we're also trying to find what are those things that, again, clients need that it's in that we can deliver. Like what are the things that are indispensable, but either too hard or often ignored? And that's where we're focusing a lot of our attention to, and then bringing our talent, bringing our technologies, and hopefully continuing to stay one step ahead of what the market needs.
So how do you stay on top of all these developments and figure out how to look around that corner?
I ingest a ton of information on a daily basis, and that's not to say that I doom scroll. I'm a pretty avid runner, and I listen to a lot of news radio podcasts. I listen to a lot of digests, articles, and so on while I run. So, and that's a time when your mind is active anyway, and so that is essentially how I do it. My business partner's the same way. She's an incredibly sharp, incredibly curious, really kind of smart business person. And so, and so that just multiplies within the rest of the team as well. So we're constantly bringing multiple perspectives on it. And then ultimately the decision's mine and my business partners to sort of point the company in where we're trying to go. But I just I find that life would be very dull if I stopped learning and stopped sort of seeking. And so that's basically how we try to stay one step ahead. We're also scenario planners. We do a lot of scenario planning at Lines. We do it for our clients actually. So there's forecasting, which is a singular point of where you're trying to figure out where your future is. And that's necessary. It's important. But at some point, you're going to strip the sort of bounds of time by, after which, like you can't really, like 5 years from now is not going to be like right now.
Right. Your confidence level declines the further out into the future you go.
Significantly. And so how do you mitigate risk in that situation? Well, you prepare for a variety of outcomes based on the drivers that you see today. And you ask yourself, what happens if patients are sicker 5 years from now? What happens if they're healthier 5 years from now? What happens if we have a recession? What happens if there's growth? What happens if a particular technology flops? What happens if, whatever, like what happens if trust erodes? Like all of those things are, go into scenario planning. That I find to be, it's really difficult, but I find it to be incredibly enjoyable to do. And you're just basically giving your clients and then yourselves this picture of like 2, 3, 4 potential realities 5, 10 years from now. So that's another way that we try to stay one step ahead.
Yep. Aside from kind of general uncertainty about the future, are there any particular challenges that you're facing?
So, I mean, yes, there's lots of, look, being a small business owner is, as I'm sure you can appreciate, it's hard. And there's a lot of information out there about startups, and there's a lot of information there about large companies. And of course, every small business owner wants to grow and wants to become larger or whatever. But small business, to me, is a unique category. And so a lot of startup rules don't apply, and nor do sort of, large public multinational companies. We play by different dynamics, and we play by our own rules. And the challenges to small business owners are unique. And there's not a lot of there's just not a lot of best practice or a lot of community around that. So it can feel really lonely. So the decisions and the challenges that we're facing right now are very specifically around this idea that I believe, this is my opinion, that small business is actually precariously in a position of sort of an existential threat right now, with a concentration of wealth and concentration of power in organizations. The smaller companies are potentially more existential. So that's why we're trying to stay ahead of that. Luckily, we have a really firm position in the industries that we serve and with the clients that we have and the community, because we've been serving them without asking for anything back. And so we feel lucky enough to be able to continue to serve them. But yeah, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here by saying just, that I think that small business is going to be redefined significantly in the next 5 or so years.
Probably scaring away the audience at this point, but it's an important discussion. Yeah.
Not necessarily. So, yeah, not necessarily. I don't necessarily think it's going to be bad. It's just going to be different. And I think that's the key. And, again, like I said, when I was going through my change period back in 2019, it's humbling, it's hard, but you manage the fundamentals and you'll be fine, but so that's essentially what I'm seeing a lot.
I think small businesses always have the advantage of being, nimble and flexible, and, which big businesses are not. But at the same time, you can't compete against a big business in areas in which you need a lot of resources and money. And so some of the emerging technology around AI, I guess it remains to be seen to what extent are there like readily available low price tools that small businesses can effectively implement, or you need to like avoid competing on technology against big businesses that just have a lot more resources and technology ability than we do.
Yeah, absolutely. You're probably familiar with this. The consulting firm Gartner has a beautiful model. It's called the Gartner hype cycle, and essentially it just shows the life cycle of how technologies go through their different periods. And I feel like a lot with the AI right now, the expectations are so overinflated that then there's this crash and this what they call trough of disappointment or disillusionment. And once that comes is when small business can actually really step in, and it's their finest hour. That's the moment. So and I think small business is like those really resilient plants, the first ones that show up, after there's like new soil to be had or whatever.
After the forest fire, yes.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a forest fire here. I'm just saying, like, you know, um, for whatever reason, like small businesses, like you're saying, like we're tough. We can, we're like we're strivers, and we don't give up super easily because it's all us, and that's that part is like whoever took the like the brave step of going into a small business, like that takes a lot of grit. I'm not just like giving myself kudos here because it's hard, right? But it's also incredibly, incredibly gratifying. And so I think there's change coming, absolutely. And I think we're going to be like the small business community is going to be awesome at navigating that change. We just have to have more. We just have to have a little bit more resilience, and also just be willing to like be cushioned to be able to weather whatever's coming at us.
Right. And the other thing you mentioned was, it's hard running a small business. And I would just highlight some things I've observed over the years with my own businesses. And, my clients are mostly small businesses for the last, 20, 25 years. There's that book, The E-Myth, that most people are familiar with that talks about, working on the business, not in the business. And we really don't have that luxury most of the time because we have to combine working in the business with on the business and not go too far in either direction. Because I've seen business owners kind of take that literally and just completely abdicate day-to-day operational responsibility and just start dreaming and coming up with big plans and strategies. Meanwhile, the wheels start wobbling and maybe falling off, right? And so figuring out the effective way to kind of balance the necessary strategic work like you're doing to prepare for the future and do the scenario analysis and everything, with making sure the business is still performing well today. That's sometimes a big challenge.
That book was actually a huge eye opener for me when I read it. I read it in 2001. I remember exactly where I was when I read it. That was one of the books that really shaped my perspective. The other one was called Small Giants: Companies That Choose to Be Great Rather Than Big. That book was so incredibly inspiring for me because I was like, that's what I want to be. I don't care about big. I care about greatness. And what does that mean? I define that. And that's challenging for a lot of, like, okay, that sounds cute. Now, how do I actually define that? You know what I mean? It was really hard. But to your point, I think there's a process that I've gone through to figure out what is my own kind of this term that I'm about to use is trademarked by, I think, Strategic Coach, which is a coaching community that's really well successful. It's called unique ability. So that's trademarked by them. I just wanted to make mention of that. And the idea is actually that there are things that any human being is like uniquely bad at. You should absolutely not touch it because you'll ruin it. Then there's stuff that you can do sort of to the minimum threshold of acceptance, like good enough. Then there's stuff that you can do well, but it tires you out. And then there's stuff that you can do all day, every day, and you're exhausted but energized. That's the part. That's that like small magic fairy dust that makes every single one of us unique. And so that's the part that you can't and shouldn't let go of inside of your business. So the E-Myth, for example, making sure the wheels aren't coming off. If mine happened to be business development, then I should never outsource business development. That's actually my part of my unique makeup. And I should always, you know, have a handle on that. If it's operations, if it's creative, if it's account management, whatever it is, right? That's my unique contribution, and I should not outsource that. The rest I should find and delegate and trust other people to do so that I can work on the business. That's sort of that it takes a while to get that balance.
Yeah, and I think there's a parallel in business, very similar with Francis Fry's works. He wrote that book. I forget what it was called. I don't know if it was Uncommon Service or that was somebody else, but her theory was, businesses, just like individuals, can't be good at everything. They're good at some things, they're bad at other things. They need to make a conscious decision for the business, what they're going to be good at and what they're okay being bad at, and not worry about what they're bad at, but just make sure that what they're good at uh, overlaps and aligns with a good segment of the marketplace that cares about what they're good at and is okay with what they're bad at.
I believe in that. I absolutely believe in that.
So shifting gears a little bit, I've got to ask you a couple obligatory finance questions since that's my day job. So how have you gone about managing the bookkeeping, the finance, the accounting at your own firm?
So we actually have a head of finance here at Linus. She's been with us for almost 18 years. Fantastic person. And essentially, so let me just take a step back by saying that a long time ago, I realized that every business is actually a financial instrument. You need to understand the gears of your financial instrument, like every business owner. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go get a degree in finance, because they can find other professionals like yourself to help them with all that, right? Then the question becomes, what are the inputs and what are the outputs of that financial instrument that you as a business owner need to keep close eyes on, and then find other trustworthy people to manage the day-to-day. So whether that's an outside firm, whether that's your own employee, in my case, and then so essentially what I'm saying is that I had to learn the job of a CFO, right? And that was my choice. I also could have hired a CFO or outsourced a fractional CFO or have, collaborated with other people. But financial acumen is a non-negotiable in business. You have to have some level of literacy in finance. You also shouldn't get mired in it, because that will significantly create inertia and slow you down. I mean, significantly. You should not be mired in it. And I speak from personal experience. When I was sitting there at 10 o'clock at night on a Tuesday or Wednesday, sending out invoices or logging whatever. And I just remember my then executive admin coming to me and saying, "Why are you doing this? I worked at a bank for decades. Like, I've managed P&Ls before." So I slowly started giving her stuff, but always keeping an eye on things. And, but together we built this financial system now.
Yeah, I agree. There's the danger of you just cannot abdicate that. Even if you're not a finance person, you don't really like finance, there's a major risk of just avoiding it altogether. Like you said, you don't want to be mired in it. You don't necessarily want to be doing any of the bookkeeping. You may not ever want to post anything yourself in QuickBooks, but there are certain kinds of reports and oversight and metrics that you need to keep an eye on, right? So I'm curious, what do you feel like you need to keep an eye on, even though you're not mired in it?
Yeah. So I know a lot of people look at and really love the P&L, and so do I. But the balance sheet, a balance sheet will tell you the story about a company, and so we have structured our balance sheet to be able to give me and my business partner basically the most of the information that we need in order to figure out the health of the business and the direction of the business, and where things are going and the balance, within that sort of financial instrument. Does it need more fuel? Does it need less fuel? Like, what, where is it at? So, I look at the balance sheet. I especially look at, I then look at cash and cash flow. So expecting basically what is our free cash flow, and that's incredibly important because cash flow cash flow is, to me, a a metric on opportunities. Like, how much opportunity do I have? How much freedom do I have? What can I do? Right? If I want to hire someone because I want to grow, cash flow has to dictate whether now is the time or not. Or if I do this on a whim, am I going to be in trouble in 2, 3, 4 months? So that's the other piece that I really, really keep a close eye on. And then we are on an accrual system, and so we can essentially have a prospective version of how much we earn every month. And so we look at our, kind of work in progress or our earnings, based on all the projects and all the systems that we have. We can project out what our earnings are going to be, 2, 3, 4, 5 months from now, and then that's when your sales and marketing kick in. Is because, like, if you see a cliff or if you see a dip, that's when you know that you have to put more effort on there. So those are the three kind of dashboard pieces that I look at all the time.
You're really talking my language, Hamid. Most business owners I talk to, they want to look at the P&L, see their revenue, see their profit, and if it looks good, they're happy. Almost nobody really wants to take the time to look at a balance sheet, and nobody ever wants to take time to look at a cash flow statement. But those three things together tell the story.
Yeah. And I don't blame anybody. Like, P&L is basically like your score, right? And absolutely. I mean, I'm not suggesting not looking at your P&L, but what I'm suggesting is your P&L is a backward looking, um, uh, information. It's backward looking, but it also is backward looking for a short period of time. So the rest of these other pieces really sort of grow the overall view of the health of that financial instrument.
Is there anything in hindsight related to finance, if you had a do-over, that you would do differently in your firm?
I'll tell you, I've been really blessed in who I've met through my life and when they have come into my life. So the people who I met, who basically told me that I need to have much higher financial acumen than I do, was an incredible wake up call to me. I was very young. I had no idea what business was all about. And so meeting those people was incredibly fortuitous for me. I'm also just, I'm also just lean a little bit more sort of financially conservatively. And so I guess that would be the one piece, is that I would maybe have taken a few more risks in hindsight, because there were opportunities in front of me, and I chose to walk away from them because I didn't have the risk tolerance, to go after them. One was a merger that I was looking at. One was a small acquisition that in hindsight could have been amazing. Those kinds of opportunities that I let go of because of just my own conservatism. But again, like, I feel so lucky that it's hard to go back and talk about regrets.
Cool. So we've been speaking, a lot about, current day and last several years, but I'm curious a little bit more about your life journey that got you to where you are now. And when you were a little boy, did you think you'd be owning and running your own business one day?
Not at all. This is something that's really surprising to me. So, um, I was basically told by my parents that I needed to become a doctor. That was like, it wasn't even like a suggestion. It was an imperative. And I didn't really want to be a doctor. It's too hard. I don't know what it was. It wasn't even that it was too hard, because I feel like I work really, really hard as a business owner, but I just was not, it didn't call to me. I liked science. I really liked studying science, which I did. But I also just really loved sort of humans and understanding and communications and art and all that stuff. And I graduated college in 1993. I couldn't find a job. I didn't really want to go to like a pharmaceutical company and be a bench chemist. Um, so I didn't know what to pursue. And right around that time, right around 94, this thing called the internet was starting to show up. And I became really obsessed with that idea and really oriented toward, hey, maybe there's a better way to communicate this complex stuff than the way that we're communicating it now. And I just said to myself, I didn't even think that I was starting a business. I The idea that I had started a business didn't actually hit home until like year 4. I had started a business for 4 years without the realization that I'd started a business, Cal. That's how latent it was.
So what were you doing in the mid late 90s?
So I basically started by teaching myself how to program HTML, by how to use design formats, and so on. And I would call companies that had been trying to sell to me in the lab, and I was trying to convince them to pay me money to either create, better communications or better marketing for them, or create a website for them. And many of them were like, a website is outside of our scope. We will never have a website in this company. I mean, this is how early it was. And it was, and I didn't know what rejection felt like. I had to go through sort of all that process of doing that. But I was so, like, I was so kind of mired in the work that I hadn't realized. And then 2001 happened, and I read that book, and I was like, oh, this is what's happened. Like, when I read the E-Myth, I'm like, I'm not a baker, I'm a bakery owner, so to speak, And so that's what gave me that realization. But for the first 4 or 5 years, I was like just in it.
Yeah, cool. And your parents, I assume, were okay with how things turned out?
I think so. May they both rest in peace. I think but by the end of all of it, I think they were um, pretty proud.
Yeah, I have a similar story. I almost went to med school. I was pre-med. I applied and got into med school, but this was, I graduated college in 1998. So, but I ended up deferring for a year and going in a different direction. And I don't know, my parents never expressed any concerns, but they probably thought, what the heck am I doing? But it worked out okay in the end.
My mother especially, she was very worried about me when I started doing this. She couldn't understand it. She didn't know what I was doing. She kept she kept suggesting to me that I go back onto the path of medical school. And then she was actually in the computer industry. She was a programmer. Uh, and so she kept talking to me about all these people that they were hiring and all the salaries that they were making or whatever. And I remember the day that all of that conversation stopped is when I told her how much I had made the year before. Um, and she realized, okay, he's onto something, So that was when all the tables turned. Is when she was just like, I still don't understand what you do, but if that many people are willing to pay you that much money for it, then keep going.
So when you're not working, what do you enjoy doing?
I love spending time with my family. So I have a daughter, and my wife and my daughter and I spend a lot of time together. Um, Living in Boulder, you have to take advantage of what nature is offering you. So I try to run these hills all the time. I'm an avid runner, like I mentioned. So I try to do a lot of trail running. In the winter, I do a lot of cross country skiing. So I love that. And then biking. Those are my passions. Those are my hobbies. And then, also connecting with friends whenever I can.
Mountain biking or road biking or both?
Road biking. Definitely road biking. Yeah. I used to, in my early 20s, I started doing a lot of endurance sports, and a lot of extreme sports. And then one by one, I switched them to the endurance versions. So I started by mountain biking, and then I switched to road biking. I was downhill skier. Now I'm a cross country skier. I hated running. Now I love running. So
Nice. Well, I'm a little bit jealous of Boulder, but I've got a great environment up here in New England, so I can get out there and do a lot of good things as well up here too.
absolutely. And also feel free to come out here anytime you want. We'll go running.
So, this has been a great conversation, and I think you probably inspired some listeners or given them a lot to think about. If somebody wants to reach out and connect with you directly, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is the best place. So I believe my handle is Hamid Ghanadan on LinkedIn. And then our website is thelinusgroup.com. So either way, I'm a big proponent of small business owners connecting with each other. So I'm happy to talk to anybody who is a small business owner and just sharing ideas or helping each other out.
Great. That's very generous. Sure, folks appreciate that. And I really appreciate you sharing everything that you have about your business, your approach, your strategy, kind of your evolution with the firm. So thank you so much for your time today, Hamid.
My pleasure. Thanks, Cal.
So folks listening, if you've enjoyed this, gotten something out of it, I know you've gotten something to think about at least, please share this podcast. Let other business owners know that it exists. Spread the word, please. This has been another exciting episode of the Marketing Agency Power Hour. We'll see you all next time. Another episode in the books. Thank you so much for tuning in. For show notes and more, please visit marketingagencypowerhour.com. This show is sponsored by SmartBooks, providing marketing agencies with bookkeeping, accounting, and finance support. With SmartBooks, you gain the clarity and confidence to make your agency a success. Until next time.